Hey friends, I decided to go home, so sorry for not being in class today. But anyways, today we'll be talking about arguments against reductionist materialism, and I'll be covering the philosophical arguments, which are very interesting, and we get to cover a fun thought experiment. First, I wanted to share this really interesting video that introduces the problem with induction, which highlights a key philosophical flaw in scientific reasoning, the idea that in order to prove a hypothesis, you need evidence, and the evidence proves or disproves a fact. So if Yaz or Sam could play that briefly, you can pause me and then switch back to the slides afterwards. And also shout out Yaz for the incredible meme. So just to start focusing in on reductionist materialism, which is also known as physicalism, this is what we'll be talking about for the rest of class. It is the idea that consciousness is derived solely from the physical, the brain and the body. So going into philosophical ideas, Leibniz, which was a very renowned Western philosopher in the 17th century or the 18th century, he had an argument directly against materialism, the thesis that perception and consciousness can be given mechanical explanations. That's another definition. So pretty much the thought experiment goes like this. So imagine that there is a machine whose construction would enable it to think, to sense, and to have perception. One could conceive it enlarged while retaining the same proportions so that one could enter it into it, just like a windmill. So pretty much as you can see in this image, it's an analogy for the brain. I mean, even in this image, you can see that this brain right here is like it's within this machine. So imagine that this machine can do the same things that we consider to be unique conscious activities, such as perceiving, thinking, sensing, and this machine can do the same. And imagine that it's enlarged so you can actually walk through it. Supposing this, one should, when visiting within it, find only parts pushing one another. So like you can see the gears here. And never anything by which to explain a perception. Thus, it is in the simple substance and not in the composite or in the machine that one must look for perception. So he's arguing that you should look at the simple substance that makes up the machine. So it's kind of a panpsychist argument, I guess. One could argue that Leibniz is taking, and he's saying that the collective activities and the physical parts of the machine don't are not the byproduct do not create the byproduct of consciousness. Rather, it's the components themselves that allow for these conscious processes such as thinking and perceiving. This thought experiment just highlights that you can't it's difficult to explain how consciousness can be the result of physical gears moving among one another, and that's equivalent to neural activity. So, do you agree with this argument? Why or why not? Do you think that this thought experiment is strong in disproving reductionist materialism? Um, and then another thing that could be interesting to explore, although it's not necessary, we can just focus on the first question, is do you think that according to the reductionist materialist theory, is consciousness formed immediately, or is it formed with time as one gains more experiences within the world? So, yeah, you can pause me and have a fun discussion about that. And when you're ready, I'm happy to explain the next thought experiment that also is interesting, a philosophical idea against reductionist materialism, which is the idea of philosophical zombies. So, what are philosophical zombies? Philosophical zombies are beings that appear to be fully conscious and are physically identical to conscious beings, but are not conscious. So, I'm going to present my full screen for this actually. The reason I'm not doing full screen is because you can't see my face, and I thought it might be better if you can see my face while I'm talking. So let's talk about this argument. This is a philosophical argument, so there's like some premises that they lay out. So the first thing to know is that most philosophers argue that if something is conceivable, so like if you can think of something being possible, then it is metaphysically possible within our world. So if philosophical zombies are metaphysically conceivable, then they are metaphysically. If philosophical zombies are conceivable, then they are metaphysically possible. So, like, if we can think of the possibility that philosophical zombies, beings that appear fully conscious on the outside, but internally are not conscious at all, if we can think of that being possible, then they are metaphysically possible. If philosophical zombies are metaphysically possible, then materialism is false, because philosophical zombies are physically identical beings, but they are not conscious. So there's something else that is creating consciousness that cannot be attributed to the physical, and that disproves materialism. Therefore, materialism is false. So, discussion, question, and this is a thought experiment proposed by David Chalmers. Also, I'll exit full screen so you can see my face again. Um, so, one question I have is, do you think that philosophical zombies are conceivable? Because if you don't think that they're conceivable in your imagination, then that disproves the entire thought experiment. And then that's one of the premises that we can talk about. And then do you have any qualms about any of the other premises? And then for the second premise, which is if philosophical zombies are metaphysically conceivable, then they are metaphysically possible. What do you guys think about that? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why? Feel free to pause me and leave slide 10 up while you're talking about it. Okay, and so here's some materialist objections to this thought experiment. One, philosophical zombies are not conceivable. If you try to imagine them in detail, we will fail. So that's definitely something that would disprove this idea. Another one is just because it is conceivable does not mean it is metaphysically possible. So that's more so a disagreement with like a general philosophical premise as opposed to within the specific argument. And lastly, even if it is metaphysically possible for philosophical zombies to exist, that doesn't guarantee that they would actually exist in our world specifically, which is also a very valid claim. So, do you agree that philosophical zombies disproves materialism, or do you believe that there are serious flaws to this argument? It'd be cool to see who votes for who agrees that philosophical zombies disproves materialism and who disagrees that philosophical zombies disproves materialism. That can just be a vote, or if you guys want, you guys can vote on which one you would prefer to talk about. And then a bigger picture question is, after this thought experiment, how has your understanding of the role of science within our knowledge frameworks changed? So, science is one of many ways to understand human consciousness, and a lot of scientists believe in materialism. So, how does um, the logical fallacy, circular reasoning of induction, beginning with that, talking about Leibniz's walking through a mechanical mill to find consciousness is not a byproduct of the processes. And then lastly, talking about philosophical zombies. How did this influence your understanding of science's role to understand consciousness beside side by side with the other knowledge frameworks we talked about in lecture 4? So yeah, if you guys want to talk about that, feel free. And and then Yaz will carry on talking about the fascinating evidence we have against that questions materialism